Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AI-powered leadership driving change in high-performance team digital event. My name is Mary, and I'm an event delivery coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box. Feel free to ask any questions you have for the speakers, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I'll now hand over to Olivia Hamill, the events lead of the CMI Northern Ireland Board, to begin today's event.
Thank you, Mary, so much. Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this lunchtime webinar on a very topical subject of AI-powered leadership, driving change in high-performance teams. I can see we have lots of people tuning in today from Malaysia, right back to David in Belfast. And we are so lucky that we are joined by two fabulous guest speakers who have given up their time to share their insights and knowledge about AI. And that is Professor Phil Hanna from Queen's University in Belfast, and also Maggie Buggy, who is a technology industry executive and co-founder of In This Together. And we are so, hopefully today, by the end of this webinar, you will have some key takeaways that will help you in your professional life and grow as a manager and as a leader within your sector. So I'm going to first of all hand over to Phil Hanna, who will share his thoughts on AI-powered leadership.
Brilliant. Thanks, Olivia, and hi, everybody. It really is great to have an opportunity to talk to you today. I want to set the scene and hopefully provide some thoughts around this, handing over then to Maggie, who will get very much more into actual good practical details. In terms of my 15 minutes, would like to encourage us to think about teams as we have them today, to think about team leaders in that context, both in terms of how things are constituted at present, but also for us to think about tomorrow. And I'm meaning here the future, because I think particularly when we're considering AI and we're looking at how this may impact what people do inside jobs and what teams do, there is definitely an element of use today, but I think there's a more interesting story around thinking about what does this mean for tomorrow or the future. And I'll start off first of all with things that I'm not really going to go into, because I'm sure most people here will already be quite familiar with this. But whenever we think about what high-performing teams look like and what they have, this is a well-researched, a well-understood area. And high-performing teams, they are ones that are clear on what their goals are. They trust one another and they feel trusted. They have that communication, they have effective processes, they have the right mix of skills, and they're supported by their organization. So I think all of these elements are well understood. If we wrap it around to the other side about our team leaders, they really are people that enable this to happen. So they are ones that can articulate that vision, that have those people skills, can work with people. They understand the importance of not only sort of focusing on the delivery of what the team's doing, but actually supporting the growth and the development of that team. They do that through empowering the team members, providing that psychological safety, and dealing with conflict as it arises. Now, part of the reason I sort of cover what we all already know is that whenever I think about the potential impact of AI on teams, there are elements here that are particularly important in terms of how we shape it, and we'll come back to those as we go through. But I think it's worthwhile to set it out at the start. Now, here's a slightly ominous slide, potentially in terms of its appearance, and two questions. And we'll get on to why it may or may not be ominous in a little bit. But the two questions I would like us to think about is the first one: how might we use, or how can we use AI to support teams today? That's a real tangible question. And the second bit is, what are our thoughts around how AI might change teams in the future? Because what we do today will actually help shape that, and there may be certain things we want to explore or to move in certain directions around. So we are talking about AI. I'll cover the not so small important print in this, because it is important just to say a few things when we are talking about AI. And Ethan Mullock refers to the jagged frontier. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that when we think of AI's capabilities, there are lots of areas where we think it's actually quite impressive and it can do things that are, wow, that is impressive. Equally, there's lots of areas where it is actually quite disappointing in terms of not being able to do things. And that sort of duality between being impressive and not being impressive is important to keep in mind. There are literally hundreds of different AI models available, and it is important to pick the right model for the right task. These models, at least today, I mean, they are agentic systems, but they are used by or directed by people, and how people use or direct those systems really determines the value or lack of value that we get out the other end. And there are a range of bigger questions, societal, ethical, sustainable, that are important for us and are important for teams to think about as well. So I won't be looking at those today, but I want to highlight those things as important elements. Instead, what I would want to sort of do by way of introduction is to think about the impact that AI may have on skills, on particular functions, because teams bring together people with skills to some shared purpose. And if we're looking at AI over the last 2.5 going on to 3 years, the pace of progress in terms of its capabilities, it is historically it's without precedent. And I say that as a computer scientist by background. My PhD 25 years ago was in AI. It was in language modeling, sort of a very different precursor to the large language models of today. But I've always had an interest in it. In the last 2.5, 3 years, the pace of progress truly has been jaw-dropping. You can pick any number of the benchmarks, and the benchmarks again are narrowly defined within a certain domain. I have a few here just to try to give you a bit of a flavoring of this. You take, for example, GPQA on the left-hand side. That you could roughly think about as sort of application of STEM knowledge. 2 years ago, the best systems that we have were no better than just a smart person using the internet. Today, we have many, many systems that actually exceed what your typical human expert can do. In fact, we have some systems that can run locally on a laptop that are sort of human expert equivalent in terms of their ability to use that knowledge. On the right-hand side, it's the Mince-Norway test. This is one for visual problem solving. A year and a bit ago, we had sort of initial models coming out that could look at visual problems. If you sat them against the Mince-Norway test, they got an IQ equivalent score of mid-60s. Today, we have a small number of models which have an IQ equivalent score greater than 135. Likewise, just a few other examples. If you take modern benchmarks, things like humanities last exam, so it's one really sort of been looked at this year, they're more significant problems. They are all ones that are sort of an R&D sort of doctoral level in terms of their sophistication. And again, very rapid progress over this year. And for things like the International Maths Olympiad or the International Programming Olympiad or Informatics Olympiad, we do have AI systems being submitted that are gold medal winning in terms of their standards. They are comparable with the best of what people can do, and that's from a global perspective. So to come back to our slide that may or may not be sort of concerning. If we think about the rate of progress, truly without precedent, the pace of adoption of what AI can do, either by individuals or by teams or within organizations, it is happening at a slower cadence. That's perfectly fine. That's nothing untoward about that. And it does differ by sectors, of course. Some sectors are moving quicker than others. We can, I think, however, be confident that over time, these tools will be integrated into the things that we do because they are useful if used appropriately. And we think we can also be confident that as they are integrated in, the impact is likely to be profound. And in much the same way with the Industrial Revolution, you had sort of the constraints about human physical labour being reduced by, for example, the introduction of steam power or machines. We're probably going to see something similar in terms of human cognitive labour. There will be certain areas where it will not have to be done by a person as it is today, but we will have options as to who or what performs those cognitive tasks. Now, the longer term aspect about this is to my read anyway, I don't think there's any consistency of view as to where we end up in the longer term. If we're thinking a little bit more close to hand, and we're thinking about the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're thinking about jobs, and we're thinking, I mean, quite often and very often are team-based, and what people do inside them. There is much greater consistency across reports thinking about how AI might be introduced into jobs and the skills that become more important for people. So in as far as we have teams as a combination of skills, we can identify which elements then are more important from a people perspective. There's a lot you could do in this, but I've got 15 minutes, so I'll provide the brief as a flavourings around it. But you can pick whatever skill framework you like. So good UK one, Sophia, in terms of skills framework for Information Edge. There are other ones. You can look at how they sort of segment skills across different levels. You can think about, so on the top right, where they have sort of different levels of sophistication of skills. Up to level 2 is quite comfortably realized today, is where you're using these tools for well-defined tasks or problems. Potentially, when you look at agentic systems, which certainly are being explored and are likely to be an area of growth over the next couple of years, you might be getting up to level 3, level 4 sort of enable. And if we zoom in and think about a team, it's a rather busy one, but we'll talk through this. Inside a team, it is probable in a number of cases, may not be all, but in a number of cases, we will have certain things that will be done by AI systems, be they agentic or be they fully under control. Now, that's over on the left-hand side. There's a few things, but it'd be much easier to scale that than it would be to scale people. But even with that capability, it will be important to give direction to it in terms of why we're doing that. It'll be important to have orchestration around actually the control and the management of it. And it'll be important to have validation around looking at the output and saying, is it right? Is it appropriate? Is it fit for purpose? And let's make an assumption that people perform those functions. And that is an assumption, but plausible assumption. If we're viewing it from a human capital, a person side of things, we can identify what are the skills that people need to be able to perform that direction, orchestration, validation. In many respects, it's not dissimilar to a team leader's role, but applied to AI. We can also think about what are the skills or the areas that things either can't be or unlikely to be, or we will not want AI to be used. And that may be around elements of trust or human connection. We may have environments that are highly unstructured or where there's tacit knowledge involved. And we can think about mindsets. Now, that's particularly relevant to me as an academic, as we're thinking about degree programs and what skills do we need to provide to our students as they become our future graduates. But if we zoom in a little bit then on teams, and I'll try to sort of summarize things then with some sort of concluding thoughts or advice around this, both in terms of how we might use AI to support team members today, and both in terms of thinking about a future where, to some extent, to some degree, we're likely to have AI being integrated into teams themselves in terms of fulfilling some of the roles. And if you think about our team leader, and we think about the skills that they need, and if you look first of all at the box on the top left-hand side in terms of foundations for tomorrow, it strikes me that if we want to have somebody that can help prepare for that tomorrow, then things that are particularly important are making sure our team leaders do have that AI expertise. I don't think it is optimal that is somebody else's role inside the team, that they are the AI expert. I think it's quite important that our team leads have an awareness of it in terms of what effective, what responsible use of AI looks like, because these will be fundamental things for the team overall. We don't know what the future looks like, but we know it's going to be different than today. So change is going to be an element of it, and a skill set around being able to help change happen, be that in terms of reshaping processes, be that in terms of helping people to develop new skills. Incredibly valuable skill set, I think, to have. Human-centered skills as well. This will be an uncertain time. It will be a frightening time for many individuals, and a team lead that is able to work well with people to help provide that psychological safety, I think, is an incredibly valued set of skills as well. Now, if we zoom over to the right-hand side of the image, tools for today, I think these are many use cases where it's use the phrase tried and tested, where we have good evidence that we can use AI tools, if used appropriately, that will provide team leaders, team members benefit. And it is around information and communication, using these tools to help us understand and process information, around communication for both shaping and finessing that communication depending upon the audience, even in terms of strategy planning and problem solving as an aid to people, around ideation, around helping with planning or helping with analysis or doing some elements of problem solving. There are lots of good use cases there. In all of this, the human members, they are the accountable, responsible individuals, and they ultimately make the decision as to what is right and appropriate. And very much today, AI tools are an enabler to helping them do their job well. That may change over time. Final bit in this slide is innovation and change on the bottom left-hand side. I think it's quite important that when we think about the future, today we build in time for the team to explore these technologies, because understanding how they are of use and where they are not of use, it is not a known situation. We need to investigate and have time for that. So actually building that into what the team does, and likewise actually building in time for change itself, I think will help those elements of the journey. But Maggie, I've seen Maggie's slide. I know she'll be able to pick up many aspects of this much better than I can. My final concluding slide is that I think we're all on a very interesting journey. I think integration of AI inside teams, as supported by team leaders, is not going to be an easy journey, but it is certainly one we can do, and I think it will take time. And my realization is that not only, yes, we need to understand the capabilities of AI, but a lot of those people skills are absolutely fundamental for this journey to be successful. So at that point, I will finish, and I'll hand back, I think, to Olivia.
Thank you so much, Phil. That was absolutely amazing and very informative. We've lots of questions, but we won't ask them yet, folks. What we do is we're keeping them to the end, and then there's time at the end for a Q&A. So keep on asking your questions. Let us know where you're joining us from. I see there's a few people from Madrid, South Africa, Carrickfergus, Aberdeen, Craigavon, not too far away from me, London and Bedford. So thank you so much all for joining us. Make sure keep on letting us know your thoughts and your opinions in the comment box, and now we'll pass on to Maggie and hear from.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Olivia. And hello, everybody. Mary, can you just make sure the slides are up? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Phil gave us a wonderful insight there on the impact of AI on skills and what it means for teams. My goal is to share insights on how leaders are adopting AI for business impact in their enterprises today. So I think it's all very clear that we're absolutely in the middle of a very intense wave of AI adoption. Tools like ChatGPT, Claude are flooding our organizations. We're experimenting with them, piloting with them, and a good number, around 40%, are being successfully implemented for individual productivity gains. That is the low-hanging fruit. But large-scale business impact comes from strategic enterprise-wide AI adoption. And the data shows that while 60% of companies are investigating these initiatives, only 5% today are successfully implementing them to achieve tangible bottom line impact. I know we have a lot of business leaders on here today. I'm a business leader myself, and bottom line impact is what really delivers shareholder value and where the rubber hits the road, as they always say. And the data shows, and also the experience shows, my own experience of selling and deploying enterprise AI capability during my time at SAP and Capgemini, is that this isn't a technology gap. It's a leadership execution gap. And the difference between the 95% and the 5% isn't better AI. It is absolutely better leadership, which is good times all round for all of us here on this call. So how does this actually look in practice? You know, high impact leaders are very much using AI to deliver better outcomes. If we take Colgate Palmolive as an example, they have decades of accumulated consumer research, ranging from social media feedback and scientific data, also stored in thousands of documents across various disparate databases. And to accelerate innovation, they needed a way to rapidly synthesize and interrogate even this vast knowledge base and empower employees beyond the core data science team to get answers to complex questions instantly. And they partnered with Microsoft to deploy a Gen AI platform, and it ingests and indexes this huge internal knowledge base. And employees can now ask really complex questions in natural language, such as, what are the top unmet needs for teeth whitening in the North American market? And the Gen AI tool then goes and reads through thousands of relevant documents and provides a cited, synthesized answer in minutes. The impact, as you can imagine, has been the dramatic acceleration of their innovation cycle, and the time required to derive insights from their data has been reduced from weeks and months down to minutes. This has democratized access to information, and more importantly then has allowed marketing, R&D, and leadership and management teams to make faster, more data-driven decisions on product development and marketing strategies. And they've also coupled that with empowering their people to move beyond consuming static information to actively shaping the inquiry and accelerating time to impact. To take another example, as a primary developer of AI tools, Microsoft's goal is very much twofold: to dramatically improve its own internal productivity and to showcase the real-world value of its products by being customer zero, if you will. And Microsoft has, as you can imagine, has deeply integrated Copilot across its internal workflows. Employees and managers use it as like a digital chief of staff for a wide range of communications tasks, including like summarizing lengthy email threads, Teams meeting summaries, drafting documents and PowerPoint presentations, analyzing and summarizing data in Excel, and preparing for meetings by synthesizing past communications. So leaders here and managers are very much using AI as a first thought partner. Now, it's important to note, it doesn't write the whole thing for its users, but it gives a solid foundation to build upon, saving valuable time and mental energy that can be reinvested into high-value, impactful conversations and communications across teams. And based on its own work trend index research and internal studies, Microsoft reports significant productivity gains. Early Copilot users were 29% faster in a series of tasks, including searching for information and writing. Users reported that Copilot helps them save time, reduce digital debt, and focus on the much more rewarding and meaningful, creative and high-impact work. And with, unsurprisingly, 77% of them are saying they would not want to go back to working without it. The key point here is that the core management and leadership skills haven't changed. Strategic thinking, operational oversight, and communication are still paramount. What's changed is the speed and depth at which they can be applied. So those are two great examples of how managers are augmenting their own work. But the next question is, how do you scale that to the entire organization? How do we build truly high-performing AI native processes? And the reality, according to a recently published MIT report, is that 95% of companies are currently failing at this aspect of it. They're stuck on the wrong side of what the researchers are calling, I think, the Gen AI divide. But the top 5% who succeed are following a clear playbook. And that playbook boils down to 3 main principles. First, they're targeting unseen workflow. Now, it's very tempting to focus on the flashy kind of sales or more front-end tools. The real money, as has been the case with every business transformation ever, is unsurprisingly in the middle and back office, the process-heavy middle and back offices. And the report found that companies are saving millions annually by automating processes. I personally love the Schneider Schneider Electric example, apologies, because it embodies this by transforming their entire supply chain into a predictive health self-healing system. So for those of you not familiar with Schneider Electric, their supply chain is managed by a really powerful but complex digital twin that processes immense amounts of data. To make it more accessible and actionable for frontline teams, they needed a much more intuitive interface that could translate really complex alerts and data into human-centric, consumable, and therefore usable insights. They have enhanced their predictive AI platform with Gen AI copilots, and those copilots allow supply chain planners and factory operators to use natural language to query real-time operational data. For example, an employee can now ask what caused the production slowdown in the Texas factory, and what are the 3 best actions to take? And by making that really complex data instantly interrogable, Gen AI empowers those frontline workers to make faster, more effective decisions. And that has been a massive factor in achieving an 85% reduction in unplanned downtime in their smart factories. And the Gen AI layer transforms their powerful predictive system into a practical everyday tool that drives efficiency and resilience on the factory floor. Now, the second principle they apply is that companies that are doing this well prioritize learning, not just automation. And the number one reason AI pilots fail is that the tools are static. They don't learn from feedback. For anything complex, users still trust humans, not because we're smarter, but because we remember, well, most of the time anyway. And the best AI native processes, like those in use at Stitch Fix, create a feedback loop where humans and AI can improve each other's performance. Now, Stitch Fix's business model is predicated on providing personalized fashion styling, a service that is really difficult to scale. And they are using AI to augment their human stylists, enabling them to serve millions of clients with a high degree of individualization that would have been impossible to do with manual processes. Now, Stitch Fix uses a hybrid, what they call human-in-the-loop system. AI algorithms analyze huge data sets of client preferences, feedback, and clothing sizing attributes to provide initial recommendations. But then a human stylist then curates these options, makes the final selections, and writes personalized notes. This human feedback is then fed back into the system, creating a continuous learning loop that improves the AI's future suggestions. This system allows Stitch Fix to deliver a personalized experience at scale at an appropriate cost to service that customer experience, and that is its core competitive advantage. It has led to much higher client satisfaction and retention, and has also increased conversion and greater efficiency and time spent for their stylists. And finally, and this is the crucial point on the core principles, companies that are adopting AI well are reshaping the talent ladder. Now, what do we mean by that? Adopting AI is fundamentally changing the construct of teams within which it is being deployed. AI, and we saw this as well from Phil's data and principles. AI adopting firms aren't actually doing mass layoffs. They're drastically slowing down hiring for junior roles. But here's the fascinating part. They're also accelerating promotions for juniors that are already within their organizations. And this creates a much more lean, experienced, and ultimately more productive team. So these three principles are the difference between AI as what I like to call like a kind of science project pilot and it having the ability to be a true business transformation. However, everybody, please remember, it is not all sunshine and rainbows in the land of AI adoption. I'm sure you're all familiar with Klarna. They had a massive, they're in the press there last week or the week before, not for this, but for other business reasons. And Klarna initially implemented a really powerful Gen AI assistant to handle a massive volume of customer support queries, aiming for big time cost savings and efficiencies. Whilst the initial results were really impressive, with the AI handling, I think, something about 2/3 of all customer chats. And that was the equivalent of like the workload of 700 full-time human agents and equated to an estimated $40 million of in profit improvement. However, it led to a significant decline in the caliber of customer service. The system really struggled with complex or emotionally charged issues that required human empathy and nuanced problem solving. So here's the proof against like all the points that Phil was like lining out for us on like the skills that are going to be really important in the future. Now, Klarna have actually, what they've shifted to now, having learned this lesson, is they've shifted to a hybrid model, using AI to handle all the routine, high volume tasks, while reinvesting in a flexible remote workforce to manage the more complex interactions. And they're therefore acknowledging that a focus on cost cutting had negatively impacted the customer experience. Okay then, so what can we deduce as emergent best practices? Please note the use of the word emergent. As we saw with Phil's slides, the pace of change here is like extreme. So these are very much emergent. But today these are the ones that like I'd call out. That first, buy, don't build when thinking about your own enterprise adoption. Well, the instinct is to build proprietary AI tools. The data does actually show that this is a mistake. The most successful organizations act more like strategic clients than software developers themselves, unless of course you have a deep organizational capability of doing that, i.e. if you're a tech firm. Prioritize partnerships with external vendors who offer deeply customizable learning capable systems. And this is a crucial point. Hold them accountable for the business outcome, not the technical features. Secondly, empower the edge. Top-down AI mandates from a central innovation lab. I'm sure lots of people on here remember the first wave of innovation lab builds when digital transformation first started around 15 years ago. Well, those central initiatives often fail to align with real-world workflows. Real transformation in this space is driven by those closest to the work. Encourage and fund AI initiatives that are championed by frontline managers and power users who have a deep understanding of the problems that they need to solve. Third, mandate learning systems. The single biggest differentiator between success and failure is whether a system can learn and adapt, as we've seen the previous use cases. Don't buy static tools for dynamic business problems. Make the ability to improve over time a non-negotiable contractual criteria in your procurement process with these vendors, and select systems that are designed to learn from user feedback and your proprietary contextual data. Finally, then, redesign the role, not just the workflow. Implementing AI is not just a technology project, it's a human capital strategy. Focusing only on the process misses the opportunity to evolve the capabilities of your team. So proactively manage the seniority biased impact of AI. And as AI automates even more repeatable entry-level tasks, shift focus from that entry-level hiring to upskilling and accelerating the promotion paths and development paths of your existing talent. As we all know, our job as leaders and managers is to reframe the conversation from one of job replacement to career acceleration and preparing for the future. Invest in upskilling existing people and creating those faster paths to promotion. And this is how you turn anxiety into motivation and build those high-performing teams that we all need for our organizations and also for our overall national productivity. Finally, then, as a very practical person, I want to leave you with a very simple route map to get started. So if you're wondering where to start, break it down. I love a 90-day plan myself, I have to say. So I always think in those plans. In the first 30 days, just focus on yourself. Pick one task in your personal professional workflow and use an AI to augment it. It's not just about saving time, it's about building the intuition that you will need to lead and manage others within your team. As we all know, you cannot lead or manage where you will not go yourself. So check out the tools and capabilities that Phil shared and get experimenting. In the next 30 days, expand that to your team. Launch one small 30-day pilot on a real business problem. The goal here isn't huge ROI, it's to get that quick win, build confidence, measure one outcome, and discover who those emergent internal AI champions are. And finally, in the last 30 days, lay the foundations for scale. Think global from the outset. Get your team together and draft your AI principles. This, from my perspective, is the most important step. By setting those clear rules around ethics, around data security, around governance and decision-making and human oversight, you create trust and psychological safety that your organization then needs to truly embrace this powerful technology, but also to adopt and deploy it responsibly in service to business outcomes. So ultimately, crossing the Gen A divide, as I said at the outset, isn't a technology problem. It's a leadership and management opportunity. And it's about having that courage to experiment, the wisdom to empower and lead our people, and the foresight to build systems that will define the future of our business and our economies. So thank you very much. And back to Olivia now for the Q&A.
Wow, Maggie, thank you so much. That has been very insightful. And Phil is joining us now, and let's get stuck into the questions. We have 20 minutes of lots of Q&A, and we had a significant amount of pre-submitted questions, so we're going to start with them. Mary, could we have one of the questions? So, how can we verify whether AI-generated content is being produced in place of authentic human interaction? Whoever wants to take that.
I'll maybe pick that up because I think it's a really interesting question, and there are certain elements of this in terms of what do we value, what does authentic mean, and there's certain sort of value statements in terms of human generated, sometimes can be sort of suggested to be better than AI generated in that sense. I think it's important for us to ask that whatever if we're generating content or producing content ourselves, it's for whom and what matters to those individuals. So you could say we have a doctor who's going to look at a scan that's been done, and we can say the doctor is 99% accurate, they're right most of the time. We could say we have an AI system, it can also look at the scan, it's right 99.9% of the time. If we were to ask people, which choice do you want to go for? There will be some people based on their values who will say, I prefer the doctor. There'll be other people based on their values who say, I prefer the AI system to do that. So I think whenever we're talking about stuff that we generate that may be done by a person or may be done by an AI, it's important to say what matters to the people that will be using this. And if we don't understand that and don't understand the mix across, then we need to do so. And likewise, we need to respect what matters to them and to be open and honest in terms of how we actually communicate that to them. So if it is important that something is human generated, then it needs to be human generated. There is grayness in this because the doctor could have used AI to help them sort of draft the comments that they provided back. But it is that devil in detail question of what really matters and to whom.
Maggie, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think Phil answered that brilliantly, but I do like VP's question here in the chat. Is there like about, I love that one about like, was AI used in the prep for these presentations? And straight up, I absolutely used AI I correlated to make sure that what I was covering was answering all, hitting the pre-submitted questions. So that's how I used it in the presentation to augment what I knew I wanted to talk about, that I thought would be useful for the audience, but also then to check that, am I answering the exam question of what people actually want to hear about?
And in terms of me being open and honest as well, absolutely. And I say that with pride because I like to have visual backdrops. And 3 years ago, I was going on Google Images to try to find backdrops, and it was really a painful expression. Now it's much easier to find it. It won't come as a surprise. As an academic, I tend to waffle. So in terms of actually doing the slides, I will put down what I want to have in the slides, and I will ask AI then to reduce it down in terms of the size. Again, it's my content, and I'm validating that's what I want to say, but it means now that I can produce slides in a fraction of the time, more than 100% faster than I could have in the past.
Brilliant. Can we have another pre-submitted question, please, Mary? So how can AI potentially change leadership? What are the challenges that ASI may bring for
I think
leaders?
that probably means AGI.
AI, yeah, sorry.
Artificial General Intelligence, I'd imagine.
Okay. Maggie, do you want to take that one?
Well, yeah, it's actually, as I kind of Zahira has covered off in the use cases, it's very much about augmenting the core disciplines of leadership and also then management. But I would also give just a very personal one that one of my previous jobs, I used to lead SAP's innovation business globally. And one of the things that I learned on my own kind of leadership journey and how I needed to change the way in which I was engaging with my own global workforce around kind of how we were developing products was really using AI capability appropriately to link the development path to, the development roadmaps to the customer context. And I found that as we started to deploy more and more agentic capability, we were also automating an awful lot of core processes, like IT support, for instance, was heavily automated. And I really realized that what my global workforce needed was for me to spend an awful lot more time on my verbal communications, charting that course and bringing things back to vision, mission, values, and correlating everything we were doing, both the products and services we were building, the way in which we were going about them, how we were using data, to ensure that I'm a big believer in culture as competitive advantage. I've never seen a business that I've been involved with or a customer or digital transformation succeed without that focus on culture. I really think, in my experience, and Phil's data thankfully backs this up as well, is that that role of culture and being the guardians of culture and values and the employee value proposition is one of the core things that are going to be needed in leadership moving forward as AGI becomes more prevalent in our workforces. Because our core job as leaders and managers is to provide stewardship to the people who choose to work with us. So that's my main number one thing of how it's changing, over and above what obviously I shared in the use cases.
Phil, anything else to add? Or
I think that I can't really add beyond that. I mean, I'm really fascinated with as a computer scientist with notions around AGI, and yeah, it's not the type of thing you can answer in a very short reply, but there's interesting future for all of us.
And that probably leads to a question that Jamie has asked in the live chat currently. In practical terms, which leadership behaviour must change first to harness AI effectively?
Curiosity, I would say 100%. Like, I am quite shocked by the amount of very senior leaders I meet who they're like, I haven't touched that stuff. I got my XYZ to do it. And I'm like, wow. I think that's the non-facetious answer. And secondly, I would say is governance. I know it's not the sexiest topic, but governance, I think, is from a leadership perspective, having that prioritized, because what these tools do when they're deployed is that they inadvertently or otherwise devolve decision making down to the lowest the most junior level. And for those of us working in highly regulated industries or with core data, we need to be really sure that we've set the governance framework appropriately. They're the two things I'd call out. Phil, I'm sure you've got views as well.
I mean, I would wholeheartedly agree with everything you mentioned, because we see those elements around adoption as well. And I think it's psychologically, it's true of any population as to where people lean into it. I suppose the future has always been changing, but I suppose we're heading into a period of maybe more acute change. And I think in that sense, people's willingness to embrace that, what agility looks like within their particular context, and how they can sort of prepare people for it, I think that's particularly valuable. personally, I think if people lean away from it, I think in many cases that's unlikely to be beneficial for them or their organizations in the longer term.
Just to kind of bring it back to basics, and just there's a question from Mike here. Phil, could you please expand a little on what Gen Tech is?
Ooh, not entirely certain, but I mean, I'll pick up on a few terms, and hopefully it'll cover what Gen Tech means in this. So, I mean, there are lots of different terminologies you can use. You can talk about AI, you can talk about generative AI, you can talk about different systems. In some sense, it's really just sort of digital capability. And when you boil things down, where it gets interesting is, I suppose, in terms of where new territory is sort of being or new ground's being broached, is in thinking about what are the capabilities that these systems have that they haven't had traditionally in the past. And I think there they are reaching out into different areas that before were simply the domain of people. Two interesting ones I'll just mention. One is the notion, we quite often talk about creativity and things like this. And I think that's an interesting one, because from a scientist's point of view, if you mention creativity and you say, oh, AI can't or can be, you can set up tests that try to measure different elements of creativity, and you can test systems, and quite often they do relatively well compared to average people. The other thing that we're talking about is agentic systems. That is one where systems have more autonomy in terms of how they go about trying to fulfill a particular task or a goal. And I think, again, these are things that we haven't really seen in many digital systems in the past, but increasingly we are seeing them. And these will be elements of, I think, change in a lot of the relationship that we have with technology broadly defined.
Actually, sorry.
No, please.
It's just Phil and Olivia, we got it wrong. That ASI, as Stefano has rightly pointed out, is artificial superintelligence. So Phil, maybe you, because which is far from my domain as a business leader. I'll have to go to Professor Phil here with like the computer science background. So I think I misinterpreted it. So thank you, Stefano. Phil.
Okay, so I'll briefly mention the ASI. I mean, there have been thinkers, incredibly smart thinkers, who have been thinking about this for decades, because it's always been the case when you think from sci-fi and intelligence and superintelligence and stuff like this. What is either good or bad, depending on your perspective, is that there is no consistency in where people end up in terms of their thoughts. Based upon the assumptions that they deem to be most probable or plausible, it takes them in different positions. What is worrying is that some go quite dystopian and some go quite utopian. So in terms of those future possibilities, if you put something like artificial superintelligence into the picture, I personally don't think we're in a position where we can predict what that means. And it's almost by definition, because we will be handling something that is smarter by definition than we are. We're not there. I don't know when we might be there, but I think we have more than enough stuff in the present and the near future to be concerned with. But I think that there are, from sort of governance frameworks and other things, that there are lots of important elements we can do now that will help shape some of those future questions or outcomes.
So we're 10 minutes into the questions, so keep them coming, and Phil and Maggie will keep on answering them. So BP, I think to expand on what you're saying there in terms of tools, etc., has asked a question. Is there a list of AI tools that are appropriate for different tasks? There seems to be many, but how to separate the legitimate ones from a startup SI tool, which may not be legitimate one? So how do you kind of feel which ones are more authentic than the other, that are, etc.?
I can maybe start, but I know Maggie will have really much more valuable stuff to me to add to this. One of the things I want to mention is a very recent benchmark that came out this week. I've always integrated it into the slides. It's GDP Val is one produced by OpenAI. And what it does is it looks at real world work tasks and has across different domains. And it looks at AI's ability to do those tasks. And it gets people both to evaluate the outcomes blind test. They don't know if a person did it or the AI did it, but it's based on real world work activities. I'll try to paste the chat or the link into the chat. One of the things that they've shown is that the different frontier models we've had today, so you can take your most recent model from Anthropic in terms of Claude, or Google in terms of Gemini, or OpenAI in terms of the ChatGPT variants. And depending upon the task, there are ones that are suited more so to one domain than another. But this is in a changing, evolving field. And this is part of the challenge, that every couple of months, what is best performance in a particular area can swap from one model to the other. And it's maybe sort of less relevant then about what is the optimal one today, as opposed to which ones are good enough to provide whatever level of function or business return that you need for that. But Maggie will have a more insightful answer than I will for that.
No, I think it's exactly that. And I was just going with, I think that same question is also the two Stephens have been asking questions and then responding on certain things. And I'd add that, like, where I've seen successful deployments and some disasters, which I'm not able to mention because it's not in the public domain, is where the checking of how data will be used, and also ensuring that there is, like, I always, even for my personal use, who I've been assessing for enterprise, I also look at, like, what is the governance structure of a lot of those startup tools, who's on the board, like who are their investors, like do they have certain people around the organization who understand what it means to hypothetically deploy their capability in a retail bank, for instance, or like a utility versus like the application in the consumer space. So checking on the use of data is very important. And secondly, I personally keep an eye on, and customers I know who are doing which of the companies that are signing the big enterprise agreements. So for instance, in the public domain a few weeks ago, OpenAI plus SAP have come out and like have done a joint collaboration. So I would be, from my organization's perspective, I'd be working with the ones for enterprise deployment that already have the partnerships in place with the big SIs and the big technology providers, because that will give you an additional level of governance. I'm not, for the sake of the record, I'm not working SAP anymore, so I don't have insight into the construct of that. But I know from previous partnerships we would have signed, it would offer customers like joint protections over joint framework agreements. And then the other tool that I'm using quite a bit for my own personal productivity is Zapier, which is like just a very fast productivity tool, which I would also add, haven't seen on my lists. But and the last word of caution I would say is, I don't know the vintage of everybody on this call, but for anybody who's been through multiple waves of digital transformation, I've seen this myself for all the customers I've done their exact digital transformations on, like, a lot of these waves lead to a huge explosion in app sprawl. And we've seen that, the SaaS wave, we've seen that, like, and again, just also be mindful as managers that don't allow a complete explosion of tools at either at process level or at horizontal, that's the opposite way around, apologies, within the vertical, the industry, or at the process layer within your organizations, because then we're just going to be signing up, you're creating the same problem that you have with huge shelfware, and also massive sucks on productivity for, wide scale experimentation within the enterprise. So I'd go back to maybe some of the tips that like Phil and I put forward, like choose where you as a team, whether you're running a small team or you're running a big function, choose where you're going to set your pilots and then land and expand based on what you collectively learn and what makes sense for your industry and also the customers or citizens that you're serving. Apologies, I'm not a big expert on government, so I can't help with the public sector ones.
Brilliant. We have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to Stefano's question. Let's address the elephant in the room. Boom, boom, boom. Do you think AI is going to be a competitor for the position of a manager in the future? Should we be pivoting in or out of the profession?
Well, I'm happy to go first from absolutely a front row enterprise seat, but as an operator, board member, and also an investor. I'm like, there's no better time to be a manager. You get to orchestrate the workforce of the future. We're going to be able to orchestrate agentic capability. You can work 24/7 with then the humans who want to, if you're in, I do a lot of work with CMOs who are like within marketing departments, like using it to really augment their creativity, or say a lot of the manufacturing customers I work with, like the visibility they have now into like their shop floors. And so my view, based on my experience, and not just, the guilt of drinking my own champagne in the space as somebody who works in the technology industry, is that there's never been a better time to be a manager. Like, the dignity of work and is fundamentally about the connection with other people, because customers, teammates, investors, shareholders, whatever it might be. So I'm like, no better time than to be a manager. But it's just as go spend time studying Phil's slides, the components that are in our role. Phil?
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, in terms of, unless we're getting into sort of artificial superintelligence, which is a different thing for humanity, if we're thinking within a more reasonable horizon, foreseeable horizon, certainly when they've been thinking about the skills that become most important for people. And this it ties into some of the questions around what does responsible use look like? We need those sort of wider skills and competencies. I think it's a fantastic time to be a manager. I think some of the expectations around managers may increase in terms of what they have to manage, but if anything, then there probably will be more opportunities in that particular space. So I think this is way down the list of areas that we would be concerned anyway about in the short term. Certainly from a university's point of view, if we're giving people the ability to work well with others, to think at that sort of high systems level, to be dealing with real world, messy, judgment-based problems, that's where we're trying to head to, and not to have people that have narrowly defined sort of specialist skills, because in many cases they're more at risk then in terms of automation in some sense.
Right, we have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask Bruce's question of, there are two questions, so it's 2 in 1. First, top management needs to ask and get AI to help address what is the biggest challenge facing organizations over the next 5 years?
Well, some of them have nothing to do with AI. I live in London. I think we can all see. Anyway, sorry, I won't bring politics into this.
No. Right, 3 more minutes left. So what do you think in relation to AI and technology? What do you think is the biggest challenges? Will kind of shape that down a bit.
I would say intelligent adoption in service to business outcome. That is it.
Yeah, and I'll answer this because I think this depends on the organization, the area that they're in. So from an education and training perspective, I think the biggest challenge that we have is to understand how jobs and teams will change, and how do we help prepare people for that changed future. I think it's fundamentally important. It's important for people in jobs to have that upskilling and development. It's fundamentally important for younger, older people coming into the workforce to have that development as well. And certainly from our point of view, this is a big challenge. But as Maggie mentioned, there's many challenges today.
Brilliant. So I have to hand back to Mary, but is there any final thoughts in terms of from Maggie and Phil? Was there anything you'd like to share? Final last words to our participants today that are watching.
I'll end how I often end for these things in that, I mean, the future is uncertain. It's both exciting, it's both scary. The one thing that I hang to is we do have agency in this to shape that future. And the more things we do together in collaboration, the better the future for all of us.
Yeah. And I would just say, I love Phil's point. And I would just say a very practical one that I try and hold myself to account on every day is really stepping back and going, what is changing and what remains the same? And whether we're in businesses or we're in public institutions or we're in education, what is the outcome that has to be delivered? And then I try and contextualize how can AI help deliver that outcome better.
Wow. I think that's a really, really, really good point to end on. Folks, please in the chat thank Phil and Maggie for their time today, because you have been absolutely amazing. You've put in so much effort to make this very engaging and answer in a very practical and candid way. So thank you so much both for your time. It has been absolutely amazing. Apologies for the questions that we didn't get through. Potentially we could look at maybe another webinar, but we will see. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Big clap.
Thank you, Mary, for organising.
So that oh, sorry, you're going to say something.
Hand back to Mary. Sorry.
So that's it for today's session. Thank you to Olivia, Prof. Phil and Maggie for your insights and expertise. Stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you for joining us.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.